there's like this little switch where you can switch between separation and oneness. It's like, okay, I see the illusion of separation. There's me and there's you, and then other people are doing this, that, and the other, yada, yada, yada. This whole world where there's 10,000 things that are separate. And then there's this switch where, oh, there's nothing. And I'm just making it all up. I'm the one that's putting it there. It's all one, and I am that one. I was writing this morning and exploring the word seems, because the word seems is so much more honest as I try to describe my experience. What I mean by this is it seems like this or it seems like that. And I say the word seems because I don't really know. And I've noticed this transition over the years where maybe at one point I was so quick to say what something is or is not. Almost like saying this is a blessing or this is a curse. But yet, more honestly, I don't really know what these things are. I don't really know what's happening or not happening. All I can really say is what it seems like from my current perspective, from where I'm standing. And this reminds me how it's so profoundly true that things are not as I see them to be. And as simple as this statement is, I want to go slow here and invite you into this inquiry to see it as deeply as you can see it. That as you go through your human experience, you are constantly looking at circumstance, looking at people, looking at life. And we can be so quick to determine what something is. And yet, the isness that we think it is isn't what it really is. It's just what we are seeing. This is also to recognize that as I go through life, what I'm experiencing is to see my own seeing, which is also to show me the mirror quality of the human experience, where everything on what appears to be the outside is simply reflecting back to me that shows me how I see things. And this is so all-encompassing. And as I sit here with my eyes closed, saying these things, I get this rush of examples throughout my daily experiences, throughout my years, throughout my entire life, where I can remember all of these experiences, but really those experiences are just perspectives that I've had that don't really see the whole picture. But yet the assumption from within, it's almost like a subconscious assumption that I'm seeing reality. Like when I look at my memory, I can think my memory is of reality, but really my memory is a memory of a perspective. So my memory isn't remembering what is or was. My memory is remembering a story I was telling. Do you see that? And whatever it is that the story is that's being told, so obviously the story shows me what exists inside of me. It shows me how I see. For example, I'm remembering a time when I was experiencing another human being completely lose their shit and became violent in their own way. Not like physically, but just violent verbally and emotionally. And there's so many different ways to see that. And it's so easy to assume that the way that I see it is the way that it is, when really that's just how I'm seeing it. It's like in one way you can say, oh, that person's an asshole. And you can think that that's true. Or you can see, oh, wow, that person is really hurting. And you see that whatever I'm seeing is just a mirror that shows me how I see other people. Do you see this? It shows you what exists on the inside. And this is interesting too, because let's just use these silly spiritual words that say, as I become more conscious, as I see more of the bigger picture, as I see beyond my own filters of ego and fear, it's so fascinating how what I see becomes more loving in nature. And likewise, when there's a lack of awareness or a lack of consciousness, then what I see becomes much more fearful in nature. And I don't know if that comes across as trivial for you, like not that big of a deal, but for me, it just touches on something that's so incredibly profound about this experience of being human. It's showing me that whatever I experience in life, I'm not separate from it. I am experiencing my own creation. Like, as I see other people, I am seeing how I see other people, which is my creation of other people. Isn't that wild? Like, and the wild part about this is that we don't even realize it's happening, right? We go about our lives thinking that what we see is actually out there, but it's not out there. It's in you. And maybe you've heard this referenced in some way, that it's all a reflection or it's all one. And it's so fascinating how in the truth of these things, they so often are just completely unnoticed. Put it this way. As you go about your life seeing what you see, the assumption is that what you're seeing is separate from you. Right? Oh, I'm seeing something out there and it's separate from me. That's the dream. The dream is the assumption that what I am experiencing and seeing is something that I am not. You could also say that I am not the creator of. And I'm hoping that as I'm talking, you can see a little bit more clearly how false that is. That yes, I can see the assumption that I am seeing something I'm separate from, but then I can also see this pointer that says I'm seeing my own seeing. And you see how you're not separate from that? It is you. Which is also to say that what you're seeing is you. Isn't that wild? I wonder, I'm sure there are people here listening that do find it as fascinating as I do. And it's wild, again, because we could go through our whole life and not realize this. It's like you go through your whole life in this dream, assuming there's two, not realizing it's only one, and you're that one. And everything you see, you put there. Everything you see is you, is your creation. Do you see this? Like in the example I was using of this person who was freaking out, I'm not responding to another person freaking out. I'm responding to my interpretation of another person freaking out, which is also to say or point to, I would see them in a way that I would see myself when I'm freaking out. So there is this mirror that shows me I see them in the way that I see myself. So that is when everyone becomes a mirror that shows you yourself. And this invites so much silence with regards to talking or gossiping about other people. It's like there's just nothing really to say. If I'm talking about another person, I'm talking about myself. And I love the little, I don't even know the word for it, but there's like this little switch where you can switch between separation and oneness. It's like, okay, I see the illusion of separation. There's me and there's you, and then other people are doing this, that, and the other, yada, yada, yada. This whole world where there's 10,000 things that are separate. And then there's this switch where, oh, there's nothing. And I'm just making it all up. I'm the one that's putting it there. It's all one. And I am that one. And the separateness is to be expected. Like, of course it looks like there's separation. Of course we see separation because it looks like there's separation. This is why in my mind there's just no judgment, like from life. There's no judgment from life that criticizes the separation that you see. Because to my heart and mind, it's just like God says, well, yeah, it looks like that. It can look like that. And then the misunderstanding is that we assume that it's real. We assume that just because we can see something a certain way, then we assume the way that we see it is real or true, which makes it even look more real. It's like you buy into it more. What is there to do with that? Right? What value does that have for the practicality of your human experience? I don't know. But what it does for me is it just invites me to take a step back. Take a step back, and I realize that there's really not much to think about at all. Because the only thing I'm thinking about is a dream. And as I take a step back, I become more present. And in that presence, I see the profound nature of these things. I see the profound emptiness and the stillness. And it's in that space where something in me, maybe we can say the soul, finds a space of deep relaxation. Like, oh, I can breathe. And do you notice this, that you don't find any suffering in what is. You only find suffering in what things seem like. Another way to say this is, you don't find us suffering over reality. You find that we suffer over our interpretations, our assumptions, our meanings, our projections. And again, this is wild. Isn't that wild? Isn't that absolutely wild? And when I say suffer, I mean to be emotionally disturbed. Because you see the assumption, right? The unconscious assumption that we are emotionally disturbed because of reality. And I wonder, as you're here with me now, if you can see how obvious it is that that's not true. Our emotions are responding to how we perceive. They're responding to the stories we're telling. And that also shows me that my emotional disturbance is 100% self-created. Like, there's nothing in reality that has the capacity to disturb me emotionally. It's like it just doesn't work that way. There's no other person that has the power to make me emotionally disturbed. All they can do is be a mirror that shows the misunderstanding within my own perspective, which is simply reflecting back the truth that I'm not seeing things clearly. Whenever I'm emotionally disturbed, even if it's just a tiny bit, I'm not seeing reality, I'm seeing my stories. And those stories are predicated on the belief in separation. Which is to believe that what I'm seeing is not my creation. And I understand how adamant we can get sometimes. Like in this example I was talking about where this person was freaking out. It was so beautifully obvious of how convinced they were that their story was happening outside of them. As they went on their rampage about their story, about why they're emotionally disturbed, it's so obvious that they're just sharing a particular narrative. And even more so, a narrative that underneath proclaimed that they weren't lovable. as they're telling me about why they're emotionally disturbed, underneath their story is another story that says they're not deserving of love. That's why they're disturbed. And then they project that story onto reality or onto others. Projecting or giving away a power to something that doesn't have that power. It's amazing how we do that. And it's so beautifully innocent and understandable. And these are the misunderstandings that we're here to work through, to see more clearly. This is to bring healing to how we see, which is simply another way of saying, seeing what's true. That's healing perception, is to see the truth of things, which is to see what things really are rather than believing in how I imagine them to be. Wild.